So GLP-1 is a hormone, a peptide hormone, which means that it's made up of amino acids. And it comes from the gut. And there are some special cells in the gut that produce this peptide. And so what we've done is to find it, first of all. And why did we look for it? It's because we were interested in seeing if we could identify hormones from the gut that would stimulate insulin secretion. So that was the first idea. So we were looking for it, and I was using a model. I had a pancreas that can produce insulin, a living pancreas lying in my laboratory, so that we could test these hormones from the gut and see if we could find this new hormone. And that eventually was possible. So, so it's a hormone that, that stimulates insulin secretion, but it also turns out, we found out that it also regulates food intake. So this is what it does in people. So it's an important regulator of appetite and food intake and nutrition and metabolism by regulating glucose also. So it's a kind of master hormone from the gut that can do a lot of things. Initially, we found this peptide, right? And you have a peptide that all of a sudden can stimulate insulin secretion. So eventually, of course, the idea that perhaps it could be used for treating people with diabetes would emerge. And that's what happened. So eventually, after we had studied a number of its functions, because, I mean, it was new, so nobody knew anything about it. Then we found that the time was right to look at patients with diabetes. And together with a German group, Michael Nauk, a very good friend of mine now, we did some studies in patients with diabetes, and we gave it as an infusion. I mean, that is in the blood vessels. And during 4 hours, we managed to bring their blood glucose levels down to completely normal levels. And from that day on, we knew that we were onto something really big with diabetes therapy. Yes. So there's really been some major discoveries here during the last few years. It's really amazing. So let me outline a few for you. So the drug, which is now called tirzepatide, which comes from the Eli Lilly in the United States, has been used to treat people with diabetes. And in the big studies that they carried out, the registration studies, it turned out that people with diabetes, when they were treated with a high dose of tirzepatide, that more than half of these patients had completely normal glucose values after the therapy. So more than half of them had complete, you could almost call it remission of their diabetes. And that's a sensation that has never been possible before. That same compound was then also studied in people with obesity, and they managed to find a weight loss during 88 weeks of therapy of 25%, 25% weight loss. That is also amazing and unheard of. And perhaps the most important milestone of it all was the study called SELECT trial with Wegovy in people with obesity but no diabetes, where they looked at 17,600 people for 4 years and looked at the occurrence of cardiovascular problems or death, and they found a reduction of 20% in this risk. So that is again a fantastic result. So these are the three, I would say, the major results that we are so happy about today. So there are a couple of reasons why we think that this may actually be useful for a number of other conditions also. And that is, the fact is that there are two things here that are very, very important. One is that it has an effect on what we call the reward center and mechanism in the brain. And that means that this mechanism is being activated when it's being inhibited actually, when you get this medication. And that means that the reward of eating is inhibited. That's one of the mechanisms. But also the reward that you obtain from other pleasures or whatever you call it, alcohol, for instance, and drug abuse will also be inhibited. And that's because of this mechanism of action, it is reasonable to hope and expect that it will be effective also on such conditions. In addition, GLP-1 has a clear anti-inflammatory action. It works on inflammation in the body and reduces it. And it also acts on the blood vessels and has an anti-atherosclerotic effect on the blood vessels. And that means that you have two systems, inflammation and the blood vessels, that are common to the entire body. And that probably explains why you have beneficial actions on the heart, on the lungs, on the kidneys, on the liver, and the entire body, and the brain and the central nervous system. So this is probably the major mechanisms of action for this hormone, and explains why you can have so many beneficial actions of a single hormone. I've noted that in the United States, the average overweight problem, or the body weight, BMI, has been decreasing for the first time in many years. And there are rumors that this could be due to the many people that are being using GLP-1 agonists. Actually, 14% of the American population has already tried it. So there may be some truth to that. And that's why you can hope that the complications of obesity, that the complications of diabetes, which are the real problem, this is the real problem, that they can be counteracted by this kind of medication. And that's why I really hope that this will have a great future, and it will be helpful for many people with these problems.